Okay, so we're looking good. We've got our plug from underneath set in with the studs just poking through. I've milled a pocket for a cover here which would have been open, and the surface finish I'm pretty happy about. So all in all, we've now got the flat bed and platform that we can use to build our rotary assembly on. So I'm going to strip this down. This is held on here with epoxy resin, so I'm going to countersink some fasteners just for added security. I'm sure the epoxy is fine on its own. Right, I've stripped the clamping off, and this just gives you an idea of where we are up to.
Et maintenant, here we are ici. We're looking where we're going to put the pivot for the top part to rotate around. I think we're about right here. I've pushed the top slide slightly over this side here. I've got a good range of adjustments. If I have it there, I can adjust to that side. I can come back. I can adjust the centre of the pivot to this side. I'm in a reasonably meaty part to put the pivot in, and what has surprised me is the level of this is actually higher than the level of the saddle. So I'm going to cut out the bottom section and then definitively mount this tight onto my base plate so there's plenty of clearance as it slides under there. Well, we're on the mill. I've trammed in my knuckle head so it's absolutely plumb. I'm about to drill a hole in the top for the pivot. I'll put a 3/4 inch hole. An inch is too big, ½ inch isn't big enough. But the knee lifting the table up and down has gone kaplunk. I've been cutting cast, and I think I've got a bit of cast stuck underneath the knee. So here we go. You know, one thing always leads to another in this place. At the bottom of your knee there's a big old bronze nut held on with 3 studs. I lubricated the drive mechanism to it, the worm gear, no joy. So I've put a jack up underneath, a big scissor jack, lifted the table, and now what I can do is I can check this big bronze nut going up and down. And basically all I've done is I've cleaned all of this out. So the trick is if your knee goes tight, scissor jack it up from the back, and then you can get at this so I'll put that back together, take the scissor jack out and start using it again. So I've left it a little bit loose there so I can pick up the nuts. should be there. So I'll just tighten those boss bolts up. And just take that jack down a little bit. Yeah, we're looking good. I'm back in business. Right, so my knee's working again. We looked at where to put this centre. Ideally I wanted it about here, but there wasn't much meat up underneath. So I moved the centre this way. I'll have to work out how it all goes on the lathe properly again in a minute. That's 1 inch diameter. It was too much. So what we'll do is we'll go for a 3/4 diameter hole, and then I'll make a stud. So I'll poke a hole through and go from there. Okay, we've had a big boy drill in here. This has to be absolutely true, so that it's going through perfectly vertically. So what we've done is we've run the table backwards and forwards, checked with the dial gauge that this was absolutely flat in comparison to the table. So I've had to shim it a little bit there. So we've got that shimmed up, got that absolutely plumb to the table, and then we've got the quill bob on with the edge gauge. So there we are, we're good. Bottom line is, this should be an accurate gauge. I want to go through by 1 inch. That's 1 inch. So I've got a ruler at the back. And as I lift my knee, when I come to the end of that ruler, I've got 1 inch. I'll slow that down. So we've taken the knuckle head off. I'm going to go on the horizontal mill, bring a cutter in on this face and square off the ends and take the corners off. The end of this is all tatty, so we're taking a big boy cutter here. Oh, I can't get behind my machine, so I can, rather than using a bolt which pushes through from the back, I've just got a piece of stud with, you know, with various threads on the end. There's 3/8 10mm, that's a 1/2 inch, that one. So I'll just tighten that up at the back of the machine, and we'll come back and use this bad boy to face this bad boy. Okay, so we've put the part on the top there. I'm just dialing it in. I call that good. So we're square. Now I'm going to bring this big old bad boy face cutter on. Tighten that. Loosen that. Just so you can get an idea of what we're doing. Put a big shell mill in the horizontal arbor of the Tom Senior, and we're going to come across and face up that grotty edge there. Right, we're in back gear. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to feed in this towards you. Because I want the cutter to be cutting on the down. So as we fly round, there we go. Machine's running in back gear. Alright, so at the end of the day, the shell mill came up with a nice finish. There's still signs that it's had action, but it's not horrible. It looks smart. There's the inside. Let's just... These 4 holes were for the hardened inserts. That's where my 3/4 inch hole comes through. You know, I had to put it in the meat. So that's where it had to live. That's where it lives. Fantastic. So here we are. We've cut the ears off avec le jiggle saw. Great fun. And now we're back shell milling the base of the top slide. Fantastic. Power feed, back gear, Tom Senior M1. Boom. Okay, we've got both of the undersides of this slide neatly trimmed back, and I've rubbed down the underside of this to try and get it nice and neat, but in doing so my gib strip was slightly high, so I've probably taken a sniff off there. So now I need to just tidy up this gib strip. We're going to smooth it off using a belt sander. I'm going to smooth this off using a belt sander, just set in a vise. There she be. Okay, so not rocket science, belt sander in woodwork vise. Okay, so we've got big old long stone there. Amazing. So the belt grinder did an okay job on this gib strip, but it was rounding it off. I thought I'd just have to kiss it, but I had to take more. So what I've got here is a shooting board we've got a piece of thick ply, cut at an angle. I'm holding my gib strip with a little screw at either end, and by just running the file on the angle part, we're getting the correct angle all the way along, and we're smoothing and we're straightening this all up so we're not all round corners and curves, but we're re-establishing a bit of a flat there, and I know that we're on the right dimension now. So, you know, I've had to adapt there. I haven't got sophisticated setups, so this is the best I can do. That's the fit surface, so I'm not touching that. It's not a tapered gib, it's just a straight gib. So we'll try that. We're back on the mill. We've flipped the slide upside down. It's now sitting on the flight deck of the Ark Royal, and I'm truing up the bottom to the top so it's dead nuts flat when the thing's moving. I'm going to take this to 5/8, which will still leave me enough meat to bolt into. Millimetre depth of cut, 5mm step over, nice cast iron. Yaroo. Medium feed, so we've got to watch it. It's moving quick that way. I don't want to take out my clamp. So we've decked off the underside of that slide. There's my gauge blocks showing we've got the right height. The hardware, the hardware's got plenty of meat to go into. If I took it down skinnier, I'll be pushing it for these cap heads. And the finish with the senior mill is nice. So I'll stone that, make sure there's no high spots, and then we'll start attaching it to the sledge. The stack of blocks I used are these Ultra Check. They're not so much slip gauges as just standard sizes, 2 inch, inch, 1/2 inch, 250, 200, 125. So they're just standard sizes that you pack up if you're aiming to hit a nominal fixed number. So we are on the Tom Senior E-Speed. Top slide mounted to the table. The sledge for the lathe ways mounted at 90 degrees to that. We've run a clock gauge for this old direction and round the back. Always tricky on this Tom Senior because there's not a lot of land. We've run a clock gauge for the side to side, so we know we're running 90 degrees. The only thing that I knew I could measure from was the inside of this V. There's nothing else square. That's a machine surface, so I've gone with that. And the next plan is I'm going to fit 2 pins at yon end to act as location pins. We'll bolt the top slide down to the sledge with cap heads. I will have to put cap heads through this surface, which is a bearing surface, which is a pity, but it's hollow underneath here, it's solid across here. I'm just putting cap heads where the heck I can. So that's my plan. Well, we're making progress. I've run a stone over the underslide of the slide, got rid of any burrs, run a stone over the top of the base part. We've done a bit of a paint job, which took ages. So I did using Tractol paint, so it was red oxide primer, then a light grey primer, and then to mix up the actual colour that we used in the end, we bought Tractol RAL 7040 and then mixed in green, black, yellow and something called random grey until I got the right shade. So it's handy when you buy paint, if you're roughly nearby but you've got some primary colours, you can drop it in. So primary colours, I'm black and we're about right on the shade. Even in my cold shed, the paint starts to set in the pot. So the simplest thing I do is just run some tape around the outside. Fold it in on itself. And that shouldn't set. We've got location pins for this piece, so just going to get in the right spot. Then we've got hardware up underneath, and we're going to bolt this down now. And the hardware is 3/16 BSF. I've stayed with the same hardware that's throughout the machine. So I'm going to tighten these two parts together and then we should be looking better. So all the hardware is in, good and tight. So we've got 5 cap heads, 3 machine screws and a couple of locating pins, dowels. So that should be pretty solid and stay stationary. I'll put a little bit of glue on there just to stop those working their way out. Everything got put together with copper slip, which I didn't show you before. Genius. The end faces line up. I've previously mounted them together in the mill and milled them to a finish, so they line up nicely. And up on the top, this sledge rides along the ways of the lathe. And this is the clamp for underneath, often form a tailstock. So what I've done is take an oversized nut turn it down, finish it, and we've got a cam with fine adjust on it as well, so that I can lock it, and I've got a little bit of wiggle room on this part here as well. So I've got a pretty nice clamping arrangement. The cross slide part now, we're finishing it up and we're getting close to mounting it. We've got a decent hole prepared, so I can't really mount it until I've done the tool holding part that swings across. But we've cut out recesses so that I can clamp a finishing closing plate on the top there. And there's your little plate that fits in. There you go. So there's your plate that fits in. When the two parts go together, we'll be able to screw a closing plate onto the top, preferably in cast with a, probably I'll put a crosshatch pattern on it. Alrighties. So we're on the lathe now. We've got the sledge that can move backwards and forwards. The oar's quite thick today, it's cold. Right, we've got the sledge that moves backwards and forwards, and we can lock it, and that, you know, it's good and solid. So far so good. It doesn't have to be ridiculously tight, and if I want to loosen it, there's just a fine adjust there, takes it right down. It's quite easy to do that rather than going up underneath, so having an adjustable collar sits well. I've thrown the essentially cross side on now, just for yucks. You know, we can see there's my centre. That'll be the centre of rotation of the cutter, and we'll be able to adjust the centre of rotation and the cutter in out as well. So the next phase is sorting this out. I will probably have to face mill a stop here. I know that's precision. We'll see. Crack in.